What's up, everybody? This is Matt Mandu from Headwaters Adventure Company, and today we're not going to do a fishing report because the weather was not good, and I don't think a lot of people got out. I myself didn't get out. I did see that fishing on the river was very good, it looked like, but today I'm going to talk about bed fishing. I'm sitting here daydreaming about all the good fishing to come in spring, and bed fishing is one of my favorite things to do. So hopefully I can give you a few tips and you can pick something up that'll help you catch a few more fish, because when I'm out there, I see people catching fish, but I see a lot of people sitting on bed fish for a long time, not getting frustrated and then leaving. And then I like to pull up and catch those fish. So there's a handful of ways you could do that, but the real big thing that I want to talk about with bed fishing is big and small. Like, those are going to be your two things. So big is something that's going to really aggravate them, and then small is generally what's going to catch them. I'm not saying that they're not going to eat the big bait, but it's something that really, really pisses them off, and especially if it's something that you're not trying to catch them on, just put it through the bed, put it through the bed, put it through the bed. And if you watch their fins, if you watch their body language, they get very frustrated, and you can tell when they're going to eat. And then you throw something small in there, and they get rid of the small threat, so they're ready for when the big one comes back in. But we'll start off with some of the things that I like to throw. I mean, always, every day I'm on the water, I like to throw a jig. But as you can see with this jig versus something like that is the size difference. This is a mop jig. So this one's got a full, big, thick, living rubber skirt, and then it's got a big trailer on here. This one is the Spicy Beaver from Reaction Innovations. I also like to throw a big, full-size brush hog on the back of it, and basically it's just a bulky presentation. This is going to be something that's got a lot of secondary action, so that when it is sitting in the bed, without you moving it, the skirt is going to be moving on its own. This is true of any jig, but especially a big jig. This is something that they're going to want out of the bed. It's a threat. It's large. So generally when you do this, like I said, you're going to go big and small. So something big and bulky, or something like one of these little dry creek tube. I mean, as you can see, that's a way different profile, slim and easy to inhale, where that one's going to take a little bit more work, and they'll still eat that. The other thing that I like to do is something like a big swim bait. Again, if you put something like that through the bed, and then you put something that you're going to be flipping in there in the bed, I mean, you can see the size difference in these. One's going to be very easy to inhale, and one is not. This is going to get them mad, and then this is what they're going to eat, because they're going to suck this in and be ready to take on the next threat, because you're going to keep putting that through there. Always, always, always for bed fishing, have two rods set up, whether it's going to be a bait as big as that, but something like a Ned rig, and then something more, crawdad profile, big jig, something along those lines. But I'm going to go over a few baits, a few different rigging options, and a few different techniques, some of which that I learned in the Delta from some people who are kind enough to tell me that are awesome, and it's not something that you'd think about. So we're going to start in with the basics. So a lot of times when I see people bed fishing, they have their Ned rigs, they have their drop shots, and they're sitting and shaking and shaking and shaking and shaking, waiting for the fish to get frustrated. And a lot of times that fish is just sitting there looking at the bait. You'll actually see them blow out water at the bait to get it to move, or pick it up by the tail and move it out of the bed. So there's a lot of things that they could do, and I see a lot of people just throw right back in there and keep doing the same thing. Sometimes it works, and it's a great place to start, but a lot of times it doesn't, and you'll see people that will sit there for too long and not catch those fish. So one of the things that I like to do is going big and small, like I had said, but there's a few different rigging options. One of my favorites is this swing head. This is a rugby head from VMC, and it's got a straight shank hook on it, which I really, really like the straight shank, especially if you're close to cover. If you're in a wide open area, if there's just rocks and stones around like that, throw anything with an exposed hook. It's not a big deal. You can get away with a lot more. In the Delta, where I was fishing a lot, you have sticks, you've got tules, you've got, docks, you've got so many different obstructions that having something weedless and that can slip in and out is really, really good. Same thing with the Texas rig. So with the Texas rig, if it's wide open, if the bed's pretty shallow, you can get away with a lighter weight, say a 1/4 ounce or so. As your vegetation gets thicker and your cover gets a little bit thicker, I like to go up to a 1/2 ounce and sometimes even a 3/4. And you might think I'm crazy for throwing a 3/4 on a bed fish just because it's in fairly shallow water. But one of the things that I really like to do to get those fish aggravated is hit them with the bait. I'll put a big old flipping weight like this on, that's a 3/4 ounce weight. So you can see that sitting on top of the bait there. So you'll take that and you'll wait till those fish go nose down, because a lot of times when you flip a bait in there, if they're not going to eat it right away, they're going to go nose down on it and they're going to check out what it is, and they'll get closer and closer and you'll wiggle it, and sometimes they'll swim off or not care. If you throw it past them and you bring it into the bed and they start nosing down on it, give it a quick little snap. Pop it, hit them in the face with a 3/4 ounce weight. They don't particularly like it. Those fish are going to dart off, shoot around the bed, and come back and nose down on it. Hit them in the face with it a few times. Once they get really aggravated, and you can usually tell that by the dorsal fin, it'll start fluctuating. You'll see the body language of the fish change. That's when you can throw that smaller bait in, or what I like to do is hop it. Instead of hitting them with it, you pop it straight up and down, and they'll just suck it right in. But might sound a little cruel, but hit them in the face with a heavy weight a handful of times, and it really gets them pissed off. The other thing you could do, and especially with the lighter weight, is just let it fall over their back. Pull it up on them and let it drip over their back and into their face. A lot of times they'll pick it up there. It's really just touching the fish. Like I said, a lot of people will sit there with their shaky head, or sit there with their drop shot, or sit there with their negative, and sit there and shake it and wait for that fish to get aggravated. But if you touch the fish instead of waiting for the fish to come touch your lure, they're going to get madder a lot faster. So that's one of the things with the standard baits that I like to do. Again, the big and small, throwing the big swim bait in there, and then something, I mean, one of my best bed baits is a 3-inch white grub. Put it on a Ned head, throw it in there, especially after you've pissed them off with a bigger bait. They're going to just inhale this. They can't help it. There's a lot of small baits like the little grub, Ned rigs, of course, you can't go wrong. I really like tubes on bed too. You could drop shot these. You could put them on a wide gap hook. You could put them with an exposed hook. You could do so much with them. There's no wrong way. Another thing that I like to do, especially if you have baits that you don't have confidence in, those fish aren't going anywhere. If you have baits that you need to get rid of because you don't catch any fish on them, throw it in a bed. It's a great way to use up plastic. You can use worms. I know a lot of people, I myself really like the bold bluegill color. It's a brown with a green on the bottom. And again, the drop shot works great. But if they're picking up that tail, or if you're just in a situation where shaking, it's really not doing it for them, I tend to drift away from that. I think the bed fishing that I do with hitting them with it and jigs and the big baits is a little bit more power fishing. But again, there's no wrong way. They're on a bed. They can't go anywhere. It's just how much time are you going to spend to get one fish to bite? And again, my favorite thing to do, if I try and I try and I try, I start hitting them with the weight until they get aggravated and they're going to eat. The worms I generally stick to are going to be more bluegill colors. I had that one. I think I left my other one. This one is a watermelon candy, so it's got green and purple flakes in there. That's another really good color that I like to use. But if you have those fish picking up the worm and dragging it out, you'll get frustrated. Just go to a smaller bait. The smaller bait's the way to go. Compact is very easy to inhale. You'll see a lot of people too throwing really bright stuff. This is methylate. This is like a translucent orange that I really like for a pre-spawn bait. It also works great as a bed fishing bait. Again, it's a 6-inch worm, so you do have it where a lot of times they'll pick up the tail. I usually just throw it Texas rig again so I can roll it over them, or I can hit them with the weight just to get them aggravated. You can drop shot it. It'll work great like that too. But generally, when I'm bed fishing, I'm staying away from worms. And when you see people throwing these colors like the whites and the chartreuses and the pinks and the methylates, it's really so that you can keep an eye on your bait. If you can, especially if you don't see the beds first, throw your natural colors. Throw your crawdads, throw your bluegill colors, because they are not wanted on the bed. And if those bass don't see you, it's a very real threat. As soon as those bass are aware of your presence, they're going to be a little bit harder to catch. So if you can, especially if you know they're bedding in an area, back off of them. Throw your natural baits around. If you get bit, make sure they have it, because they do a lot of suck it in, spit it out, suck it in, spit it out on the bed. They're very, very fast. So get them annoyed a few times. If you get bit and you know they have it, definitely swing. But if you get popped and you don't feel pressure, reel in and recast out, or start shaking it again, because they are very, very fast. And generally, if you hook them once and they come off, they are harder to catch, especially if it's the female. Like I said, tubes. Again, green color, just easy to keep an eye on. And then big baits. So generally what I'm going to do for a big bait is going to be something like an 8-inch swim bait. You can go even bigger than that. This one's also, I wouldn't call it big, but another, you know, thick-bodied swim bait presentation. The Dark Sleeper is a really cool one because the hook is in the bait. But something like that, it's got a great bluegill presentation. It sits in the bed flat. It's not going to fall over on its sides. It's going to sit there and look very, very natural, and they absolutely hate it. One of the things that you can do too, if you like to throw a jig, is something like a vibrating jig. Generally, I would do this on a bedfish where you're hopping it in and go brrr into the bed and let it fall. Just be careful because you do have that big exposed hook. And you don't want to be snagging these fish, especially if you're in a tournament, you want them to count. I won't do this with a rattle trap, although sometimes you can get that to work too. But if they're going to go after something that's vibrating, the big single hook is a good way to go. The other thing that is very popular right now is something like the Gillies from Berkley. This is a very realistic, very movable bait. And it's just so realistic, especially you could Texas rig it, which a lot of people do. I've had great success drop shotting it. The way I've got this one set up is I've actually got a twist lock in it with a nail weight in the chin. So I've got it with an exposed hook. So when they pick that up, I don't have to set the hook incredibly hard. I just have to lean into them and they're hooked up. Something like that is really nice too, because once that gets in there, there's not as much for it to get thrown out of the mouth as with some of your jig heads and things like that flinging around, because you just have a plastic bait, which is pretty cool. There's a few different sizes to those, but I highly recommend, as a bed bait in particular, the Gillies are a great way to go, and they come in a number of different sizes. But there's plenty of ways to catch them on the bed. Like I said, it's a great way to use up some of your baits that you don't have faith in or you've had for a really long time. One of the other ways to catch them that I don't think a lot of people realize, and I didn't realize until I was told, is topwaters for bedding bass. And this is really dependent on how deep your beds are. I haven't done this for spots and smallmouth, but for largemouth, it does work incredibly well. This is one of the best days I've had bed fishing, is on a spook like that. Regular old walking bait, something like this, you can walk it into the bed and you leave it there. And you'll think I'm crazy, but you leave it there longer than you think you should. And there's times, especially when I was in the Delta, where you would see the males, you could catch the males, the females were there but wouldn't bite, and you'd see them rolling on each other because in their beds on a low tide, they're only in a foot or two of water. So with something like this, you could walk it over the bed and leave it. And somebody told me this, and I tried it, and I didn't really think much of it, but you leave it, and just bam, you just get blasted. And the cool thing is, 9 times out of 10, it's the female hitting it. So especially when you're fishing for those bigger baits, a topwater bait is a great way to go to bedfish. With that, again, being said, one of the other baits that I've played with once I've learned this were your big baits. Again, these fish don't want a large threat in there, especially when there's more than the one threat coming. This is a big threat. So generally, they're going to try to chase this away, and they're going to eat your small bait just so they're ready for something large to come back that they need to be aware of and deter. So a small bait, if you have a 2-inch bluegill that comes into the bed, you're like, you're not worth my time, gone. You don't have to worry about that bluegill anymore. Something like this, they're going to try and chase off generally. But if you put that over their bed, especially something that's going to clack into it, that'll float, something like this, slammer, you can get just the front of it to walk and do a tight little spot like you would with a walking bait. And I mean, it's just ridiculous. 9 times out of 10, again, it's the female that hits the top water. And I don't know why that is, but it's awesome. It can make for some really, really fun days. And again, depending on your cover, that's when I'll go to a frog versus a walking bait. Because a frog, you can walk in a very small area without moving it forward very far. So you'll walk it up to the bed, and you'll, again, let it sit there, let it sit there, let it sit there for longer than you think you should, and you will absolutely get blasted. It doesn't work on all of them, but you'll see these fish rise, especially on a clear day, and put their nose on it. And some days they just absolutely cannot stand it. You can definitely use smaller swim baits. I throw a lot of 6-inch swim baits when I'm bed fishing too. This one is just a 4.8 just because I had that with me. But anywhere from the 4.8 to the 6.8 are a great thing to throw on the bed. If you're going to do it where you're actually more expectant to get eaten, I put a 2.8, a 3.3 on a Ned rig head or a small football head or something like that. Pull it into the bed. Again, they're going to take out that smaller threat. My personal favorite way, though, is flipping. I like to use a heavy weight and some sort of flipping bait, like a D-bomb, or this is the Pack-A-Craw, which I really, really like. There's also the Reactions Innovations Sweet Beavers, which are awesome as well. Just a beaver-style bait or a brush hog-style bait. That is my favorite because they're big. They're still something that can get inhaled relatively easily. And it's something that I can either hit them with it or roll the bait down them just so I can have contact with the fish. I really don't like throwing an exposed hook when I'm bed fishing because I like to touch the fish just to get them aggravated. If they're not eating, if they're not throwing in what you're offering, hit them. Hit them with the weight. Pop them right in the face with it. I know it's ridiculous, but hit them with it 2 or 3 times. When they come back to check it out, pop it straight up, and they're just going to inhale it and take off. I don't like to peg my weights when I'm doing this because if you don't peg your weight, when that fish eats it, a lot of times that bait will come away from the weight. Or if they eat the weight and you set the hook really hard, that can pop their mouth open and you can miss a hook set. If this comes away from the bait, they get all hooked and you don't have to worry about that happening. The white is something that I go to if I'm on top of the bed. If I'm not on top of the bed, again, I'm going to go with that natural color, a watermelon red, a green pumpkin, something like that. You could put some orange on the claws or some scent on it if you think that helps. I do it now and then, especially on my big swim baits. But and then the fun thing is sometimes they do eat the big swim baits and you're not expecting it. It's pretty awesome. With these baits, especially with the brush hog and the beaver baits and the Pack-A-Craws, I'm usually using a 4-aught or a 5-aught flipping hook. So something that is stout, and that especially if they're around cover, you're going to be able to get them out quickly. Heavy line, slam them, drag them in the boat within seconds. You're not fighting those fish when you have a big hook like this. If you're using something more open water, small hooks, set the hook, let them run, pull drag, fight them. You'll have a better chance of keeping them on the hook. If you're in tight cover, if you're using heavy line and big hooks, hook them, get them in the boat or you will lose fish. This puts a big hole in their mouth, especially if you are using the larger size weight. That's going to put pressure against it. And with that big hole, the hook can drop out of their mouth, which you don't want. Obviously, you want to catch those giant fish, especially when you have chance at big bedding bass this time of year. Your Nico rigs work incredibly well. You know, this is something that you could use virtually any plastic. And if you could take away one thing from this, is have something visible, have something natural, have something very large, have something large, have something small. Those are the biggest things about bed fishing that I can bestow on anyone. The topwater bite is really fun. Again, that was something I did in the Delta. If you have shallow beds, I highly recommend you try it. And besides that, I mean, just go out there and have fun. Bed fishing's awesome. Get a good pair of polarized glasses so you can keep track of the fish. If there's a male and a female in a bed, do not catch the male first. Generally, that will give you a better chance at the female. So if the male's in the bed, he's going to hit. And that's why I don't like to use an exposed hook, because he's going to hit this, and he's going to hit it, and he's going to hit it, and I'm going to let him hang on to it. I'm going to let him pull me around and not set the hook. I might even hit my thumb bar and let him swim off with it so he could drop it way out of the bed, and then you bring it back. Because if the male can't handle it, the female gets upset, and she's going to show whatever comes into the bed who's boss. So don't hook the male. Sometimes you can't help it. Sometimes they hook themselves. But especially if that female's in there, I really like to throw something that's not exposed, because at some point she's going to get frustrated that he can't take care of his business, and that's when she's going to start coming in. And that male's going to push her away a lot of the time too. He'll actually get alongside her and push her out of the bed so she doesn't eat it. So then you have to start aiming for her. But if he's pushing her out of the way, that means she's agitated. He's not doing his job, and she has potential to be caught. Again, that's that big, small. It's just a matter of time and how much time you're going to be willing to put into each of these fish. I can't speak. With the spotted bass and the smallmouth bass, a Ned rig, a tube is a phenomenal way to go. Again, they could also eat that incredibly well. This is probably my favorite, either this or a Texas rig version of the same thing, but not exposed hook. Do not catch the male until the female is caught, and you'll have a lot better chance at those 5, 6, 7, 8, 10-pound fish. I mean, I haven't caught a 10-pounder off a bed, but I've caught a few 9s, and it's fun. I love bed fishing. You get to watch their body language. It's like sight fishing. You get to watch them eat it just like you do with the topwater. It's exhilarating. When they come into it really, really hard, you're like, oh, it's going to happen. And then they swim off, and you're like, oh, come on. And when you finally get them, it's just awesome. Bed fishing is definitely one of my favorite things to do. Let me see. I've got the chat open. If anybody has any questions, I see there's only a couple people watching. I'm sure there'll be more people watch this in the future. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. We'll hang out here for a few more minutes. But yeah, crawdad colors, bluegill colors. And if this has helped anybody at all, I'm hoping to do one on pre-spawn fishing just because that's going to come before bed fishing. I could just talk about bed fishing for far too long because I really, really enjoy it. It's one of my favorite things. Big hooks, medium-sized baits, small baits, giant baits, and topwater. If you get the chance, throw topwater on a really shallow bed and hang on. It's just too much fun to watch those fish come up and blast it, especially because they submarine up on it so slow. And you're like, oh, he's going to get it, get it. Boom. All right. Well, would you start throwing this on highland reservoirs? I don't know if you mean that if I start now. I don't think they're spawning quite yet, especially from where we are. We've had snow, cold weather. It's going to be down at, I think, 27 degrees tomorrow morning. These techniques, yes, I would most definitely throw in a highland reservoir. It's just, again, going to be the depth of the bed and the size of the fish that are on it. If there's a male on it, especially like Berryessa, some place that I fish that I've had so much fun bed fishing, you've got a lot of spots and smallmouth bass that are on, I would say, more of the main lake, still in the pockets, but they're going to be more out towards the main lake, where deep back in the pockets, you're going to have your largemouth. I always have a Ned rig or a tube or a shaky head with a 4-inch Senko tied on. All of those things work great across the board, but especially for the smallmouth and the spotted bass. They'll eat these, but I start to use this maybe as an aggravator, but I'm not expecting it all to get bit on this, or at least not set the hook on it. With the smallmouth and the spots, they're usually more aggressive, I think, than the largemouth. So these small baits usually get them going pretty quickly. And I also don't seem, and maybe this is a me thing, but I haven't seen as many male and female pairs in the spot and smallmouth as I have in the largemouth. So with the techniques that I've told you about, I would do it the same way. Don't do an exposed hook, because if you want to catch her, if there's 2 on a bed, definitely keep an exposed hook, because that male's going to eat it far quicker than she will generally, and you don't want to catch him. Like I said, if he's not doing his job, she's going to step in. So keep the hook in the bait if you're aiming for her. If it's just a male on a bed, throw an exposed hook. Do whatever you want. Usually they're pretty easy. Spots and smallies, small baits. I mean, hop, they smash it. I'd still do a flipping hook like this. Even a smallmouth, largemouth, anything can inhale that pretty well. It's just the largemouth has a potential of eating this or your 8-inch bait as well if they really get pissed off. But generally, your smallmouth and spots aren't. I would definitely stick to more this style for that. But yeah, the highland reservoirs, I've had, so at Berryessa, fishing one of the Yakabass tournaments, actually, it wasn't this bait, but I was throwing a bait like this and one of these to get one of my bites. I found like a 7-pounder on a bed, and I went there the day before and I threw both these baits. And for the pre-fishing, do not catch a bed fish. Male, you can, but don't catch a female pre-fishing, because she'll probably be gone the next day if she starts to get stressed out. But my plan again was to throw the big bait and then throw the small one in there to work on her, because she showed some interest in the pre-fishing day. But on the tournament day, carp were spawning everywhere around the bed. They were churning up the water. She was chasing them off. And so I get up there and I throw something like this. First cast, start bringing it in the bed. Male pins it to the bottom. He lets it go. Female comes in and hails it, starts swimming off. And so I ended up catching it on this, which I didn't get a great hook into it. I did end up landing it, and it helped me get third in that tournament. But that was unexpected. But that's what I'm saying is with those largemouth, you never can tell. I'm using that as something to really get in their heads and mess with them just to get them riled up. I'm going to catch them on this is my thought, but they can still eat that. And that's why one of these ones too, the Savage Gear ones, if you're trying to catch them on a swim bait, which is a lot of fun, just know with a big bait, you're going to have a lot of short strikes. And with the Savage Gear, they have a built-in trailer hook that is really, really nice. So if you are getting those tail grabbers and shorter strikes, definitely do a stinger hook. If you're not planning to get bit on this, or if you don't want to get bit on this, use something with a big wide gap hook in it. Because I've got a Nate's Baits that's a 9 1/4 inch with a 12-aught beast hook in it. They can't accidentally hook themselves. You can't accidentally poke them with that. So if you're not planning to get bit on the big bait, you could do something like that, take the stinger hook off. But if you do, they'll a lot of times get half of this bait in there, and that stinger hook's really good for getting, those fish that aren't going to eat the whole bait. If you're one of those guys that really want to catch them on a swim bait, which I just really want to catch them. I care less how, on what, as long as I got a line in my hand, I'll hand line them. I'll noodle them. But yeah, so big baits, small baits, if you're going to catch them on a big bait, the stinger hook is a great idea. With these Savage Gear baits too, they're not outrageously expensive, and they absolutely hate having one of these in their bed. Then also Savage Gear makes some really cool bluegill baits too that you could check into, because that bluegill profile really, really gets them riled up. But because it's so wide, they don't generally eat it as well. With exception to something like this, just because this Berkley one's really soft, it really can fold good. Something like that, still very viable as a good bed bait. One of the other ones that I've had a lot of luck on is the Jackal Gantrel. That's another great bed bait. If you have ever seen one of those, I didn't have mine with me today, but it's got a spot on the chin where you could put a split ring and a weight so that it'll actually nose down into the bed, and it's got 3 joints, feathers on the hook, and it'll sit there and just kind of wave in the bed with very, very little movement, and they absolutely hate it. My hookup ratio isn't great, but God, as far as getting them riled up, that is a great, great bait to check out. Any other questions before I sign off? Generally when I'm doing this, again, open beds, open water, I use 6-pound test, exposed hooks, fight the fish. You'll land a lot of them that way. As soon as you get into cover, if you get around dock pylons, if you get around trees, laydowns, things like that, 20-pound straight fluoro. I mean, you could do straight braid on a lot of these fish. They're on the bed. They're not going anywhere. They don't particularly care. I try to be as natural as possible until they realize I'm there. After that, it doesn't matter what you do. That's when you go to your bright baits, piss them off. If you can catch them without them seeing you, you'll have the best chance at getting them and the least amount of time invested in each one of those fish. So I guess that's going to be about it. We did get some of the Jackal frogs in, so those are pretty cool. We got the Kiara frog, which is their small frame frog, and the Gavacho frog, and we just started carrying some Demiki stuff too. So if you're in the market for any more tackle, definitely check out what we've got. I've still got to get them on the website, but come into the shop and check them out. We're shipping kayaks now. If anybody needs one anywhere all over the United States, we can get them to you. So thanks for watching, and I hope some of these tips helped you out. And if you do catch a fish on a topwater, let me know, because I want to know that it worked for somebody else. Man, it's an awesome, awesome bite when you get it. That walking bait, leave it there longer than you think you should, you will get bit on it. And again, 9 times out of 10, it's the female that blasts it. It's awesome. So until next time, stay fishy, my friends, and we're all waiting on that warmer weather to come in. So hold out. It's going to be a little bit more finesse fishing for about another month, and then it's going to get fun. So have a good night, guys. I'll talk to you soon.